Welcome back to the Centered in the City podcast. I'm your host, Wade Brill, and I am so glad you are here. Before we dive into today's solo episode exploring navigating uncertainty with current topics like the election, I want you to take a deep breath in with me and a big exhale out. Making any sounds you need. Let's do one more of those. Deep breath in and a big exhale or release out. All right, now we're ready. Let's settle in and let's get centered. We made it, people. We are on the other side of the election. And depending on who you wanted to win, you feel different things. And that's completely normal. And I'm not here to talk politics. I'm here to create space for us to be empowered as individuals to self-regulate our emotions, our mindset, our nervous system, so that when we see and be with triggering news or responses, we hopefully won't get as triggered or stressed and can come back to our center again and again and again. So what does it mean? Let's clarify this first. What does it mean to come back to our center? We've talked about this a lot on various episodes. If you're a new time listener, welcome. Coming back to our center is the practice of us rooting back into the present moment, into our bodies. It's about us being able to have some sort of inner strength and clarity to accept the reality as it is, to see things clearly, and to be able to also be present with an open heart. Can we stay connected to not only self, but to others, to the environment? And that's a really hard thing to do. And that's why this is called practicing. We practice staying centered because for us to be centered 100% of the time is really effing hard and not really feasible in our modern day world. So we practice. And again, we can come back to this home base to find ourselves, to find our authentic voice, to find that connection to our truth, and to be able from that place to live and breathe and act with more kindness, more connected to our values, and live a life where we're not in a stress reaction. Wouldn't that be lovely? So I'm recording this the day after the election, and I saw a post, actually, I guess technically a story share from somebody in my community said something really jarring, and I don't want to repeat it because I want to respect their privacy, but essentially it was a lot of finger pointing and somebody who I could assume voted for Trump. And I noticed right in that moment, like anger build in my body. I felt my fist tighten. I felt my shoulders go up into my ears, this inner impulse to write back at her and give her a piece of my mind, type of energy. And I took a moment to feel all of that. I screenshotted it and sent it to a few friends without her name on it. And as a way to help me process what was being shared and reflected, I noticed, wow, Wade, in those few moments afterwards, I was like, wow, you got really hijacked by that interaction. And when I slowed down to observe, I was like, wow, okay, I got really angry because I felt her post was very judgmental. It didn't really create some space for there to be a conversation or there to be curiosity. It felt very dividing and divisive. Yet my response, my initial response back to her was just meeting that energy, right? I was coming right back at her with a bite, and that wouldn't have been helpful that would have created more ruptures and disconnection and an unhealthy expression of anger and frustration and hurt. So I brought my mind back to the present moment by connecting to my body, by taking a deep breath in, by putting my phone away, like disconnecting from the phone, people. Like, I think that is a huge thing here. Disconnecting from the source, took some space, took a walk outside, and let myself come down to ground. And from that place, I then had a conversation with a different friend about the message, one of the friends I had sent the screenshot to. And it was very validating. There, again, wasn't a bashing of this person. It wasn't gossipy. It was more so having a space to express my feelings in a safer place where I could actually process my feelings and have clarity of thought instead of just being hijacked by the emotional reaction of feeling defensive, of feeling othered, which is very much how I know a lot of people feel these days. As a quick side note story, when I was phone banking the last few weeks, I had some conversations with people who outright told me that they were going to vote for Trump. And we got to have a really curious conversation. And even though we both had different political beliefs around a lot of topics, holding space for curiosity with one another was very important to help people feel heard, to help people feel seen. And what beautiful thing happened at the end of the conversation was like, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing, because you know what? When we live in these isolated bubbles, we don't get to hear the other quote unquote sides. And it's really important that we have dialogues, which I think we're, as a society, not great at right now because of how divided and divisive people can be and how uncomfortable it is for us to have uncomfortable conversations. And so our intolerance for them shuts us off and down from having them. So even though I didn't agree with these people when I was having conversations, I could still listen and be curious. And even though internally I was slightly triggered at some of the things that they were saying, I was still staying in my own body, staying grounded. And at the end of the conversation, we both felt this genuine appreciation for you being a human being, me being a human being, for us to both sharing honestly and openly with each other. And how can we cohabitat and live and share resources and space with one another? As humans, we navigate this modern day world where we're constantly surrounded and connected to news, to the latest headlines, to photos of war, of destruction, of devastation. It is so easy for us and our bodies, our minds, our nervous systems to get hijacked and to be taken away from our center. I think also part of this loop that has been very much ingrained in us, especially over the last 4+ years post pandemic life, is this addiction to drama. And you know what? I take that back. I think as humans, we've been always sort of addicted to drama, whether there's like gossip happening in our communities, whether there's some sort of drama on a telenovela, right? Like there is always this kind of hunger for drama and entertainment. And the media and social media has gotten really good at learning how to hook our attention to take us away. So as we live in this attention economy, it is so important. I talk about this all the time. It is so important that we're conscious of where are we giving our attention to, right? Attention is this invisible resource. It's not like our money about being conscious of where are we spending our money, but our attention is this invisible resource. And so it's like, are we being conscious of where are we spending our attention? Where does our attention go? Because it is one of the most valuable resources we have that we give away without consciousness a lot of the time. A really helpful tool that we can use to gain consciousness of where our attention is going. Can you guess what I'm about to say? It's free, and you have one right where you are. It's your body. When we tune into our body, we can gain so much information about our attention. So I welcome you to really practice tuning into the sensations of your body and pay attention to what are your physical signs and symptoms of a stress response. When you get activated, what happens inside of you? And if we expand this, we can think about, okay, as you experience, maybe you see a headline or see a message from somebody and it activates an emotion of anger. What tells you that you're experiencing anger right now? Do your fists get tight? Do you feel heat? Do you want to fight? Do you want to shut down? Like, what happens inside of your body? When you're feeling fear from a headline, what sensations activate inside of you? Do you get small? Do you get frozen? Do you get bigger? Do you search for something to distract you? Do you dig into the comment section to investigate more? Do you need more information? And then notice what thoughts get connected when you experience those emotions and you have those physical sensations. Does the mind spiral into fear, catastrophizing what could happen? Do you see images? Do you hear sounds? Like, what comes alive for you? And then what are your go-to practices or resources that you connect to help you navigate that fear or that anger or that sadness or that grief? And what are the skillful ways, like if you were to imagine reaching into a tool bag, like what tools do you reach for to help you in that moment come back to your center? So for anger, I notice that having someone to talk to verbally process what I'm feeling can be really helpful. I notice taking myself out on a walk, being in nature, sunshine can be really helpful. When I'm activated by fear, human connection is so important for me. Reaching out for a hug, again, calling a friend, taking some deep breaths, dancing with the fear, putting on some good music. When I'm hit and triggered with a lot of grief, like maybe I see a horrific photo of children starving or whatever it might be, I know we've seen so many of those. Really, what helps me in that moment is like putting the phone away, putting technology away, and putting my hands on my heart and offering a lot of compassion to the place of suffering within me, to the people suffering in the world, to the pain that's in the world. I think a lot of the times we think if we acknowledge the unpleasant things, that makes it bigger. But if you think back to being a child and being afraid of the boogeyman in the closet or the monster under your bed, the way to face that fear, to be with the unknown of that spooky, scary thing, is to go look at it, right? Go look under your bed. Do you see it? Go look in your closet. So we get to learn things when we face them, not avoid them. When we look and see the reality, what we're feeling, what we're thinking, what we're experiencing in the moment, we can have space to, again, accept what's here instead of trying to numb out, resist it. And I know this becomes another fear for people is, if I face it, it's going to overwhelm me. There's going to be a sense of resignation. Like it's just so overwhelming. I have to throw my hands up and like roll over, play dead feeling, that sense of powerlessness. But what actually happens is the opposite. When we face what's here with a lot of skill, we want to make sure we're not overwhelming our system, that we can titrate the experience in, which means, take it sip by sip. But when we can allow our minds, our bodies, our nervous systems to grow the capacity, the resiliency to be with what we're feeling and experiencing, we then actually gain power. We are not powerless. And when we have this capacity to be with what is, we can stand really grounded and rooted. And then from that place, we then again get to see things more clearly and can take action that feels more in alignment with our values versus acting from a place of reaction, which is typically we're not our highest, best selves when we're in a reactionary state. I at least know I'm not. So we want to come back to these places inside of us where we feel as centered as possible. So we can touch and taste into that and move and live life through that place, not hijacked by our emotions, not hijacked by our thoughts, not hijacked by the external headlines and chaos of life. My job right now, your job right now, each of our jobs right now is to be empowered within our own minds, bodies, and hearts to self-regulate ourselves so that we can be in relationship to one another. I just was having a conversation with a client the other day who was expressing how stressful work has been the last few days. This was pre-election because she noticed everybody is on edge of some sort. And if we are not taking care of ourselves, if we're not cleaning up our side of the street, then it bleeds into our relationships. It not only affects our own health and well-being, but it affects those around us. That's why I always talk about how self-care isn't selfish, it's smart. And this type of self-care is caring for self, the mind, the body, the emotions, the nervous system. I wrote a post the other day on Instagram about how to manage the election anxiety. And one of the tips was about prioritizing your peace, really thinking about what helps you feel good, what helps you feel calm and grounded and in your centered space. And how can you prioritize doing that on a daily basis so that we're building, each of us is building the capacity to then face life, face this really volatile, uncertain, chaotic, ambiguous world that we navigate. And we don't get centered by doing more. I know there's a natural impulse like, oh, if I clean the house, I'm going to feel centered, which, there's some science around that and it does help us feel good for sure, right? Our environment, our space matters. But we kind of think if I control and do more, and if I send all these emails out on my plate, right, and I distract myself in these ways, I'm taking care of business. I'm going to be better off. But we're actually then not meeting the source of where the tension is coming from, right? We're putting on a Band-Aid. We're pretending, oh, I don't see that wound, and thinking it's just going to heal. So we're going to put on a sweater and just go throughout our day. And we might not notice if it gets infected or if it starts to pus, or maybe it starts to scab and it heals fine or good enough, or maybe there ends up being a little scar. But what would it have been like if we actually took the time to clean that wound, maybe put a little ointment on it, then a Band-Aid? How would it heal? Would it heal maybe faster? Would it heal with more ease? So how we take care of ourselves really matters as we're navigating life. And I'm not just saying, are you using night cream? I'm really talking about the inner work. It's courageous work to look inwards, to feel, to be with what is here. So as we step into this new season of life, this new change, may we remember every day we navigate is uncertain. May we grab hold of our own attention and notice where it goes. Who do we give it to? Can we give it to ourselves and recognize, how do our bodies get triggered or activated by the news and the headlines that are around us? How can we meet ourselves in those moments skillfully? And even thinking about what boundaries can we set, or how do we want to be in relationship to our phones and to news and to headlines? Do we like that we might feel addicted to it? Because if we do, and that's a conscious choice, then that's a conscious choice. But if you notice you're addicted to it and it's not something that you're wanting, then there are ways to untangle from it. So asking yourself, what kind of boundaries do I want to set for myself so that I can care for myself? Because you matter. Each of you matters. And the more we can remember that and practice that and own that, the more we can feel empowered to show up in our lives and to support each other in this world. And the world needs each of us. And may you also remember that you are never alone. Thanks for listening to today's episode. I'd love to hear what's resonating for you. What insights have you gained? Reach out to me on Instagram at OneWade. Feel free to share an email with me linked in the show notes. I'm here to support you. So please keep showing up, listening to this podcast, sharing this podcast. Feel free to reach out with questions or other requests on solo podcast episodes. And we will get through this day and each day following, being as present and connected to ourselves as we can. Thanks for being here. Until next time, stay centered.